Welcome back to you. Now, Private Eye magazine is the funniest, cleverest, best magazine in the entire world. There you go. I've done my sycophantic bit. But it is actually superbly satirical. It's broken story after story as well, and there's even rumours that I've written for it at times. 50 years old this year, and Deputy Editor Adam McQueen joins me from London. Welcome to you.
Hi, nice to be here. You've promoted me there. I'm not actually deputy editor.
Oh, I thought
Famously,
you were.
No one at the Eye has a job title, so just sort of terribly important person. I quite like deputy editor. We can go with that if you like.
That's true, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, every time I spend any time with you guys, no one really has a job description, but you're all deputy editor in a way, I suppose.
Job titles, descriptions, anything like that. I was brought in 1997 on work experience, and I've just sort of carried on being that. No one's actually fired me yet, so I assume I actually work for them. I get paid sometimes. So.
You see, this is going to baffle a lot of people watching in Canada because. We had a magazine called Frank Magazine at one point. I used to write a column for that. It was okay. The Onion is totally different. North American humour and satire is radically different. But this is a very important magazine. It comes out, every 2 weeks? And what's your circulation now? 300,000-400,000?
The last one was around 210,000, but we did an extraordinary issue earlier this year when the Murdochs, Rupert and James, were hauled up in front of Parliament to answer questions about phone hacking, which sold a whopping 253,000 copies. Wow. It's doing well at the moment, yeah.
That's very impressive.
I suppose to explain it, you mentioned the Onion. The thing about the Eye is the Onion kind of resembles the middle section of the sandwich, which is each edition of Private Eye. So it's kind of jokes and satire about things that are going on in the news, but it's sandwiched by investigative journalism, right through from kind of gossip from behind the scenes on newspapers and television channels, right through to the back pages, which are all sort of miscarriages of justice and government misspending and contracts being assigned to cronies and that kind of thing. So it's a really odd mixture. It evolved into this strange package that I don't think if you pitched it to a publisher now and said it's going to be a mixture of tasteless jokes and investigative journalism, I'm not sure anyone will go for it, but it works brilliantly. Yeah,
no, I think you're completely right in that, because if the concept is written down, it seems like a disaster, but it's incredibly. I mean, I've a copy here. You can buy this, by the way, in Canada. Most the larger bookstores do have copies of it, and you can go online and subscribe. And frankly, some of it will be too esoteric, be too confined to the UK. You won't follow it, but the humour you certainly will. Yeah. Every 2 weeks when it arrives, the first thing I read is the message boards. It's making fun of people who write on websites.
Isn't it? Yeah.
It's so well observed. It's brilliantly funny.
That universal language of the internet. No, you sometimes look at actual message boards on newspaper websites and you just think, he's copied this out, hasn't he? This is just as far as it goes. Craig Brown, actually, who writes our celebrity diary in the back every week, actually starts off just by copying out actual words of the people he's parodying. And quite often it's only the tiniest little tweak or exaggeration that he needs to turn it into a sort of full-blown satiric fantasy, but it's that accurate. Yeah.
Craig Brown, this is a column that appears in Private Eye, and it's taking a famous person, many of whom will be very well known in North America, and it's a mockery of how they write. But again, it's so beautifully observed that it could be the person you're never entirely sure, and yet it's incredibly funny, which is satire at its best. But we should emphasise here that now the humour is very hardcore. Is not the right word, but it can be severe, I think, for North Americans, because you don't pull punches, and everyone is a valid target, I suppose.
Absolutely everyone, right the way through. And I think that's always been the rule, that if a point is worth making through a joke, then the joke will be made. Whatever accusations might be made about taste or anything like that. I mean, I think some things don't go in, but generally they can find a joke in anything. Famously, the edition after the death of Princess Diana was pulled from a lot of newsstands in the UK, not because it was in any way taking the mickey out of that tragic event, but it did go in quite hard on the media's coverage of it and dared to point out that actually a lot of the newspapers who were sort of sobbing the loudest about how awful it was that she was being pursued by paparazzi photographers had been trying to outbid each other millions of pounds for those photos taken by those paparazzi photographers a couple of days previously, and that just in the strange mood of sort of deference and national mourning that was declared afterwards, that was kind of seen as unacceptable. So it's not afraid, and in Hislop, our editor, is not afraid to kind of make those decisions and go in with stuff that he knows is going to be seen as tasteless and that he's going to get complaints about. And famously, we have a couple of letters in pretty much every issue saying, I'm cancelling my subscription, I'm so outraged by what you wrote in the last issue.
Yes, exactly. And of course, to prove this is true, you have been sued several times by some very important and powerful people.
Yeah, and that didn't stop us either. I mean, that was the thing. The funny thing is, looking back at it, Rupert Murdoch, who the Eye has been covering for sort of 40 years, right back to when he first moved into newspapers in Britain, never so much as a legal letter, let alone a writ, at all. And we've carried on right the way through, as I say, to the phone hacking scandals and things. Robert Maxwell, who was another newspaper proprietor in Britain, famously would fire in a writ and the full force of the British legal establishment over the slightest mention. He sued not just about stories about his dodgy business practices, but he would sue over cartoons, he would sue over lookalikes, which is another regular thing that we run in our pages. Yeah. He would sue over front covers, he'd sue over everything. Again, that didn't stop anyone at all, and eventually he fell off the back of his yacht in 1991, just after issuing a writ against the Eye over a story where we claimed he was pilfering from his company's pension funds, which of course it turned out a few weeks later was exactly what he had been up to all the time. So yeah. It was kind of strike one to us on that one. We had been right to go after him.
Now, for the longest time, the great and greatly missed Peter Cook was the owner of the magazine. He's no longer with us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which gave a certain spirit to it now. So there's no danger of you ever being sued to the point where you can't continue, of the money just not being there, so that wonderful people like you aren't paid.
I think there is. I think there's every danger of that. There's only. I mean, the strange thing is that libel is not so much of an issue now in the British courts. I'm saying that, I'm touching wood as I say that. But the bottom kind of fell out of the libel market, and once businessmen and celebrities realised that they weren't going to make enormous amounts of tax-free money by going after Private Eye and other newspapers for libel, then that kind of fell out of it. So the big thing now is privacy injunctions, and you get legal letters from people saying, you know, this is absolutely dreadful that you're looking into private matters concerning my client's private life. And the private matters that Private Eye's journalists are looking into tend to be things like, you know, their salary or their perks or their pension pot or things like that. Suddenly their privacy is enormously important to them. But there is, I mean, there was a case a couple of years ago which was a privacy injunction which came in. And I think the legal bills came in at something like £750,000. And it was for the sake of a story which in the end was going to be a couple of paragraphs at best. Or it would have been a couple of paragraphs before the legal action started. In the end, it ended up being sort of double-page spread and enormous headlines everywhere, which again is probably a good reason not to take legal action.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of these are soccer players having affairs, and it's pretty well known, but they manage to try to control it and keep it out of the public eye, and then some MP mentions it in Parliament, and of course it goes public.
Yes, that's extraordinary. Well, John Hemming is the MP who tends to, whenever a privacy injunction comes in, he can be relied on to pop up in Parliament and name the person concerned if he thinks it's a case that absolutely should be out there. And fantastically, he has a brilliant defence, because he famously a few years ago came along to one of the Private Eye lunches, which we hold every fortnight for kind of the great and good and the good, the bad and the ugly, I should probably say. And he got, in the fantastic description of one of my colleagues, hog-whimperingly drunk, and confessed to all the assembled journalists around the table that he was having an affair with his researcher and he'd made her pregnant, to which, you know, notebooks come out all around the table and all the details went into the next issue. But no one can accuse him of kind of being in any way reticent about his own private life or trying to hide anything there. So he's become the kind of champion of free speech. It's incredible.
Now, I'm one of those privileged people. I come to Private Eye lunches when I'm in Britain. What always stuns me, and it has done over the years, even before you were involved, young man, is everyone is there. I mean, some of the most important, famous people who are mocked always in the magazine, and they're sitting there.
Yeah. Cabinet ministers, they come along. I think they probably don't tell the Whip's office that they're coming along, but we've had them all there. Mrs Thatcher famously came to 2 Private lunches before she was Prime Minister, it has to be said, and she ended up flirting outrageously, by all accounts, with Paul Foot, who was our Trotskyist and resident Socialist Workers' Party man down at the end of the table. They got on terribly, terribly well.
Wonderful. Look, congratulations. It's a wonderful achievement. I'll see you guys in January. Thank you so much, and you take care, my friend.